This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, from Pittsburgh to Scranton and from Philadelphia to Erie, it's Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenewalt, Senior Fellow of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. And for this week's show, we have a special guest with us. We have Mr. Ed Arnold, who is the president of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. And we find that this is a new installment of the Arnold Report. Ed, we have a whole series of new questions. As you can imagine, the world is changing by the day now, and therefore world economics are changing by the day. Let's start out with an event that just took place in the world. We have a viewer who's written to us, will the death of Queen Elizabeth II affect the value of the English pound? And how long will any of these changes last?
Number one, the answer is absolutely no. The Queen was a very nice person. She had absolutely no authority. She had absolutely no public opinion. She, relatively speaking, was just a figurehead in the truest sense of the word. Well, yes, the pound has dropped badly, but that's because the government is in chaos in England, as is Europe. So.
Okay, so you don't think that her passing has anything to do with
No,
the pound then?
Absolutely not.
Okay, we'll look at the Prime Minister Liz Truss and the Conservative majority instead. Let's see. Secondly, what effects will President Biden's college student loan cancellation program have in our economy? How should the smart investor respond to it?
Well, basically, first of all, it is just another thing of our government pushing inflation because you're pouring more and more economy. Yes, a lot of these people that have our loans forgiven will obviously go spend more. So that's just going to aggravate inflation. Obviously, more debt that we have no way of paying back. It is a very, very bad decision. What should be done, in my opinion, which should have been done a while ago, possibly it would even involve in forgiving some debt. The interest rate on student debt is way too high. It should be probably more in the area of 1-2%. So if you really were to look at the debt right now for undergraduate only, if you're getting a graduate degree and you can't afford to pay for it, then you shouldn't get it if you can't get a decent job. So, but undergraduate, if you were to say we're going to forgive the interest or a good part of the interest, that may be appropriate, again, for your basically lower income people. Also, right now, Pell Grants, which are a very good program, but they have not kept up. They are what I call CPI inflation as opposed to college inflation, which is double the CPI and has been forever. Therefore, the Pell Grant is way too low. Therefore, if they were to increase the Pell Grant, people wouldn't have to take on as much debt because they'd be getting more, and this again, the very low income. The problem really is more and more we're freezing the middle income out of college because the government doesn't give them any aid, and obviously they can't afford the high cost of college either. So overall, if we made those changes as opposed to this draconian thing of just forgiving debt, as a lot of people have said, what about all those people that didn't go to college, but they're going to pay for people that did, and all those people that paid their student debt? That's too bad. So anyway, it's a sad decision. It's saying we are buying votes, which is, of course, what the Democratic Party does.
Well, isn't this also an unconstitutional action in that this is President Biden saying that he can authorize the expenditure of monies, which is the Congress's purview?
Well, he had even made that statement 6 months ago, he can't do this when he was being pressured to do it because he can't legally do it. But again, the Democratic Party believes they're above the law.
President Obama said it couldn't be done either when he was on.
As I say, we've now changed it. We have two sets of laws for some Americans and for the Democratic Party.
It's a shame that we can't have one set of laws. Thirdly, and we want our viewers to know that you can send in your questions to Mr. Arnold for a future edition of the Arnold Report at the email address at the bottom of the screen. So please send us your questions. We want to hear from you. The next question, Ed, from another viewer is, how will energy prices ever be driven down for a lengthy period of time if our government will not permit many fuel sources to be used?
The answer is our government doesn't want energy prices to come down. They want them to go higher because they want to force everybody to theoretically buy alternative energy. The fact that there's no alternative energy in giant quantities available, we have to have a major, major breakthrough in battery technology. Because last I heard, the sun does not shine 24 hours a day. The wind does not blow 24 hours every day. So therefore, there must be good battery backup, and we do not have it. The cost of our present battery system is very high, but the cost in raw materials, a car battery weighs approximately 1,000 pounds. If you want to build tens of millions or hundreds of millions of cars to replace all the cars in the world, you would obviously not have, because the developed world doesn't want mines. Last I heard, minerals come from mines. And therefore, since we are opposed to new mines, Biden canceling a major mine in Minnesota that finally went through after years all the approvals, he just said arbitrarily, no, I don't want to do any mining in America. So basically at this particular, and the same way right now there's a major lithium development going on in Nevada, which again, the Indians claim, as they do 90% of the West, it's a burial ground. So therefore they don't want to do lithium. Again, whatever metal it is, and there's many different ways they're working on batteries today, but the fact still remains, batteries are 1,000 pounds for a car. And obviously for a power plant, a windmill, a sun, these take major batteries. And until battery technology is improved, we cannot have major electric for everything.
Okay, shifting gears a little bit, Ed. Another viewer wants to know about healthcare. New hospitals are being built in our area, but these hospitals are having staffing difficulties. What effect will these expansions have on our healthcare system if there are not enough staff to operate them? Will this drive medical costs upward?
There is no question medical costs are going to rise. Pretty much any industry that is a one-on-one industry, and healthcare is very heavily, it can't be automated. You need personal attention. Just like there's a shortage of craftsmen, there's a shortage of truck drivers. These are all industries that are one-on-one industries. And so therefore there is, and wages are going up astronomical. And to say there's a solution, I really don't know. As far as us building these new hospitals, that, yes, is there going to be more pressure on staffing? And there already is. So whether you're in a new hospital or an old hospital, you're right, healthcare is going to rise. A good part of it because the biggest cost in healthcare is still labor, and labor is in short supply.
Okay. Well, going to another big item in the news for the last several months. What will the future of Twitter be? Will Elon Musk, will Elon Musk buy it? And what are the forecasts for its future profitability?
Well, first of all, I could say it's a moot point because if he buys it, it's a private company, so what its profitability is irrelevant to the average public. And therefore, if he doesn't buy it, definitely don't buy the stock because the company is very badly run and is not a good investment, in my humble opinion. You can right now buy it on the speculation that it's going to go through because the price of the stock and the price he must buy it at is substantially different.
The interesting thing is it doesn't produce anything.
Well, yes, it does. Social media is the wealth of the world today. That's where all your profitable companies are basically social media or related to technology, not to making things. All your auto companies and so on, they're doing very poorly because they make something. People that make something are not considered valuable in the world today.
That's quite a shift in economic thinking, Ed. Going along a different route, why is the Pennsylvania Turnpike so unprofitable? What should the state do to reduce unpaid tolls?
Well, first of all, the Pennsylvania Turnpike is not unprofitable. We passed a law around 20 years ago that said the Pennsylvania Turnpike must give to the state of Pennsylvania, theoretically for our other highways, $450 million a year. Well, since the Turnpike doesn't make $450 million a year, they've been borrowing to basically make that payment. They pretty much, I think, break even. They've been increasing their tolls, which have been totally counterproductive because actually their volume has dropped. So even though their tolls are greater, their revenue hasn't gone up that much. They are finally, next year, going to drop the $450 million down to $50 million. But in the meantime, we now have $6 billion of debt, which they're going to have to continue to raise tolls to pay the interest and pay the debt down. So basically, our legislators and our government of Pennsylvania have, and they've known this for many years now, they're just pretty much, for all practical purposes, bankrupted, though they're hurting the state because the tolls will continue to rise, making Pennsylvania, a lot of people must use the turnpike because the roads are so inferior. Unfortunately, there's no relief in sight because now the debt's there. Even if they went to put the payment to zero, it's still, they got to pay the debt back.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've done shows on this in the past, and most of the members, I'm sure that all of the members of the legislature realize that the Turnpike is funding maintenance of other state roads, in addition to giving a little bit of money to SEPTA, the mass transit in southeastern Pennsylvania, and PATH, mass transit in Pittsburgh. But yet, how can one expect the Turnpike to be profitable when they bear that incredible weight? Quite surprising. The next question is, are our political leaders addressing our nation's over-reliance on China? What should be done in Harrisburg and in Washington to set this relationship right?
Well, first of all, obviously this is a national problem, not a Pennsylvania problem, so our legislators in Pennsylvania pretty much can do nothing. But at the national level, we obviously, in theory, have made a first step with this subsidizing our very profitable and cash-rich technology industries, which, again, have been moved to China tremendously to make a few dollars more. How we can convince American companies to do what's good for America and not just their bottom line is a challenge. But basically, we're going to find out the hard way that really our dependence on China is going to cause more and more crises. But there's no real easy solution. The answer is we're going to have to more and more move production out of China, which we're slowly starting to do, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting that one of our board members from the past, who's passed on now, Derek Hathaway, he of course was the president and CEO of Harsco, a worldwide corporation, and many, many years ago he had set up a policy that they weren't going to go, Harsco wasn't going to China because he didn't believe that the investment environment there was safe over the long term. That's interesting. Next question is, why has the dollar gotten stronger recently when our economy is filled with all kinds of government hurdles? Will the dollar stay strong next year, Ed?
Well, as a cute little statement, we are the best horse in the glue factory. The world obviously has decided that debt is the solution to all problems. And we still have a very large economy, even though it's a debt-driven economy. But the whole Europe, China, every major economy in the world is a debt-driven economy. So it appears that the world, our currency is the largest. It is still the world trading currency. And so therefore, it will continue to be strong because I guess not, well, Europe obviously has a bigger energy problem than we do. Now, again, if we eventually have peace with Russia, will that change? I'm not quite sure. But basically, Europe has depended upon their prosperity on the raw materials from Russia. And that's been a very bad policy now, which of course Trump had warned them and they laughed at him. Now, of course, it's not so funny.
Okay, let's cut here let's take a break, and we'll be right back after this.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors, the largest, most influential municipal association in the Commonwealth. Since 1921, PSATS has been preserving and strengthening township government and securing greater visibility and involvement for townships in the state and federal political arenas. Covering 95% of Pennsylvania's land mass, townships represent 5.5 million residents, more than any other type of political subdivision in Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.
Welcome back to Behind the Headlines. On the second section of the Arnold Report, Mr. Arnold and I are going to continue to answer questions from you, the viewer, and we again urge you to send your questions on finance and economics to us at Susquehanna Valley Center, and we have the email address at the bottom of the screen. Okay? All right, we look forward to hearing from you. Mr. Arnold, next. In the search for safe or more profitable investments, I wish to ask you how you feel about investments in art. Are paintings or sculptures a good investment?
Theoretically, have appreciated, first of all, like all things, they go in and out of style as far as particular artists, particular periods, particular styles. But the biggest thing is there's no way to invest in art. There are a few instruments that a person could invest, but generally they have high minimums, they have a tremendous overhead, and therefore the amount of profit that would filter down to you from the thing is questionable. The people who promoted them will do well, but the people that invested, I'm not so sure. So the answer is art, in theory, is going to appreciate, but I know of no way that is effectively efficient to invest in it.
Oh, okay, very good. Moving from art to the track, what is the future of horse racing in Pennsylvania? Is it viable, or is it just window dressing for our casinos now?
Basically, it's window dressing for the casinos, but it's viable. All 6 racetracks in Pennsylvania have a casino. The racetracks, over 80% of their income comes from taxes on the casinos. Now, the casinos also, theory, benefit from being at the racetrack because more people come to get while they're at the racetrack, which is a question mark because more and more betting is online. But basically, there is a synergy between the two. The racetracks need the casinos, but our government has made, when they passed the law for the casinos, said you must support the racetracks. So racetracks in Pennsylvania will continue to be viable because they're going to get money from the casinos.
Okay. Well, the next question is on the minds, I know, of many of my friends, and even myself. I'd really appreciate your insight into this. How far do you believe that the Fed will raise interest rates, Ed?
Well, let's put it this way. I guess you can say, how fast is the economy going to collapse? I assume there's a point where the economy will collapse hard enough the Fed will stop. At this point, it would appear that there's going to be a couple more raises. Resident rate is around 3%. Whether it'll go up to as high as 5% is a question mark. In theory, the Fed rate should be equal to or higher than inflation, and obviously that is not going to happen. But at the same time, the economy is obviously in very perilous times. So overall, I believe the Fed is going to have several more rate increases. But obviously, I don't think the Fed even knows what they're going to do. So I sure don't.
No, okay. Well, if you don't know what's going to happen at the Fed, let's go across the sea to China and their currency issues. This viewer would like to know, why is China's currency weakening now? How should American investors respond to this development?
First of all, I don't think you should make any kind of investment based on currencies, because currencies are very complicated and very manipulated. In the case of China, totally manipulated. China's economy, just like everybody else's economy, is tremendously based upon debt. Their economy also was very heavily based on construction. And now their major construction companies, in housing specifically, they have empty cities. I've been there. I've seen an empty city in China. They have large, beautiful cities that nobody lives in because they built them just to create jobs, I guess, is their primary thing. So basically, China is just like us. They're living in a debt world. It's a very unstable economy. I would not invest in China because you've also got the government is even more manipulative than our government.
Okay. I've seen those empty cities too on many news reports. Quite surprising. Next viewer wants to know about mutual funds. The next viewer writes, should mutual fund holders be converting their funds into exchange-traded funds, ETFs?
My answer is probably yes. Overall, in the last quite a few years now, the average, again, this is averages, there are exceptions, of course, that because the ETFs have next to no commissions and your average investment fund has a commission of 1 to 2%, they do not outperform the ETFs enough to overcome that commission difference. So overall, I would say for the average person, first of all, ETFs are liquid. You can sell them in a relatively, just like you can sell a stock in a relatively short period of time. There's a bid and the ask and all that sort of process. But basically, they're liquid. Whereas if you have an investment manager, it is a slow process to liquidate. So you have a lot less flexibility, and you have a lot less cost with the ETFs. You have a lot more flexibility with it. So I would recommend for the average person, ETFs. And again, there are ETFs in anything, whether you want it in healthcare, whether you're in construction, whether you want it in a certain foreign country, whatever you want. There are literally hundreds of ETFs by several giant and some small, and so on. And basically speaking, they're low-cost operations.
Okay. Well, the next viewer would like to know if you could please explain dividend stocks to them. And they would like to know if dividend stocks are good investments right now.
Again, but dividend stocks, if you want to have the most efficient dividend
Well,
stock,
first, if you could tell us what a dividend stock is.
well, dividend stock, obviously, the company pays you money. If you own the company, it's like sort of paying you interest, except the dividend is not guaranteed. When you get a thing with interest, you get your interest. Where in the case of a dividend, it's cash that you get back on your investment, but it's an arbitrary, just say, most companies are pretty stable about it, not necessarily. But REITs, real estate investment trusts, have a single tax process. Right now, if you buy stock in General Motors pays you a 5% dividend. They must pay taxes first, and then they pay the dividend. You must pay taxes. In a REIT, they pay no taxes. They must pay out 90% of their money, but they pay no taxes. So basically, and they yield, but you got to be careful because they invest primarily in shopping centers and buildings and so on. So really, right now, there's some very good ones, like the one Simon, who happens to be owned King of Prussia, is doing fine because King of Prussia is obviously a very good property, and they have other good properties, including Hershey. Actually, Tanger, I believe, is Hershey, and someone in Lancaster. So basically, there's some good REITs are a little more risky in the sense of make sure what their assets are, but overall they're way more efficient because the tax only taxed once. And yes, I think today that may be a good idea. I don't know, it's a little difficult. I do want to make one statement though, and that is, there is one stock, in my opinion, and I never do this.
I know you haven't done this.
That is LNG. Well, LNG is the parent company. There's also another initial for the one that they have a subsidiary that pays a dividend. They own 6 what I call frozen gas companies. They're exporting gas. They take regular natural gas, put it through their freezer, and at minus 57 degrees, ship it all over the world. They are sold out in their production for the next 20 years. They have never missed their objectives. They've increased their dividend on a regular basis. On their subsidiary that pays a dividend. The major stock does not pay a dividend. The subsidiary does pay a dividend. It's extremely reliable. The stock will fluctuate up and down, but the fact remains the company is just extremely successful. I'm even told Obama is a major investor, but I don't.
Oh, so now you paid a trip to Martha's Vineyard.
But anyway, no, I was at this location. It's in Louisiana. All their plants are in Louisiana. Anyway, basically, but they do pay a good dividend, as high as 7%, depending on what the stock is. From 5 to 7, it varies. And they have increased their dividend X number of times since they've gone public.
Mm-hmm. Well, the next question we have, which may wrap up our report today, is how is the British government capping home energy costs for the next 2 years? Could the United States government do the same? With the ascension of Liz Truss, the conservative leader to the prime ministership, taking the place of Boris Johnson, she has promised the British people that she will cap energy costs for them for the next 2 years. And it's been met with great hoopla there. How are they going to do it, Ed?
Well, first of all, it's very complicated because they're talking about guaranteeing your utility bill, which is your home heating bill, gas, and your electric bill at $1 amount, which that doesn't make any sense to me because obviously it depends how much electricity you use and how much you keep your home heated. So overall, the plan is not totally developed. It is obviously in the process. It's just one more massive, very expensive government subsidy. And it's sort of contradictory, because on the one side, we're saying we want to subsidize so you can afford to buy electric and gas. And the other side, we don't want you to have electric and gas. We want to make it very expensive. So it sort of confuses me. Our government, the one side, they're saying that, well, we really do want you to buy electric, but of course, what we won't want to talk about, in England, there is no, electric is basically gas-powered, and there is a fair amount of alternative energy. They have a lot of windmills. So therefore, but again, their windmills are major subsidies. I just saw where they're building a new one. This is all in the North Sea. They have one giant windmill farm. They're building another one now. But they're talking about tens of billions of dollars in subsidies for the windmills. Well, if they're so efficient, why must they be subsidized? I don't understand that. So basically, at this point, all the countries in Europe are talking about trying to give relief to people because we're complaining about gas prices in this country. And I'm talking about natural gas. I'm not talking about fuel gas. Natural gas in America used to be under $3 per 100,000 units, or whatever the unit is, per unit. And but basically, it's been that way. It jumps between $2.50 and $3.25 for years. All of a sudden, it jumped up to $9.50 in America. Right now, it's around $7.50. In Europe, it's over $20. It was before around, I don't know, $5, $6. It's now over $20 because, of course, they got all their cheap gas from Russia. Basically speaking, obviously, power has got to come from something. And really, they do have a lot of wind farms in Europe, but specifically in the North Sea and also in the Baltic Sea. And so that basically England may have 30% of their power coming from wind. But again, it's very expensive. They also, of course, get a tremendous amount of gas from the North Sea, also from Norway. That at this point, the gas has gotten very expensive in Europe because the majority still came from Russia. And therefore, at this point, how they're going to adjust it is complicated. But it definitely, if we did it in this country, it would just be one more hundreds of billions of dollars of subsidies.
Well, it's causing the Europeans to look at a new generation of nuclear power plants that are smaller and do not have nuclear rods to dispose of at the end. This is a whole new generation, which will be interesting. We look forward to exploring this in future shows.
Unfortunately, we're talking about something that 10 years from now may be effective. We're talking about a crisis today.
Yes, that's very true.
Nobody seems to connect the dots that for us to build, and we're looking to build those in this country too. However, to get our approvals will take years and years, and then to build them more years. So we're talking about a solution for next generation, and we're creating a crisis in this generation.
Thank you very much for your expertise, Ed. We appreciate you sharing the time with us. Stay tuned next week for another Behind the Headlines, and we'll see you soon with another Arnold Report. See you then.